Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Arc Synergy. Make sure you stick around. Today we're going to go over another state licensure information. So in those videos, you'll get all the information that you need. Your speech language pathology license in any state in the US. So feel free to check out our library of videos. Episodes we go over each specific state licensure separately so they're easy to find and go through. And without any further ado, let's go into today's episode. This week, we are going to cover the SLP licensing renewal steps for New York. So, New York does not call this a license renewal, they label it as a registration renewal. So your SLP license in New York is valid for life once issued. What you are renewing instead every 3 years is your registration to practice. So that distinction matters a little bit because it changes the terminology on every form and of course all the notice that you receive. So the cycle, like I mentioned, it's a triannual cycle, and of course they have CEU requirements which we will go over. So let us go through the full detail. So like I said, the first thing to understand about New York is the state education department issues you a license that never expired per se. It is valid unless revoked, annulled, or suspended by the Board of Regents. So what does expire is your registration, so the authorization to actually practice. If your registration lapses, you are still licensed, but you cannot legally practice until you re-register. Every form you interact with will state that. So the registration renews every 3 years. Your renewal date is tied to your birth month, so it is not a fixed statewide deadline. After your initial registration, the NYSED adjusts your cycle so that subsequent renewals align with the month before your birthday. This means every SLP in New York has different renewal deadlines. So the NYSED mails a renewal notice with a 7-character PIN approximately 4 to 5 months before your registration expires. You do not want to lose that PIN because you need it to renew online. You can renew online if either of two conditions are true. There are 5 months or fewer remaining in your current registration period, and your last valid registration period ended less than 4 months ago. Outside of that window, you need to submit a delayed registration application instead. Now let's go over your CEU requirements. New York requires 30 continuing competency hours per 3-year registration cycle. And within that, what that means is that at least 20 hours must be in a professional area directly related to assessment and treatment of speech, voice, language, hearing, and swallowing disorders. Up to 10 hours may be in a related area, so that can include indirect topics like laws, regulation, reimbursement, supervision, business practice, um, pedagogy, ethics, and other topics supporting SLP practices. Maximum 2/3 of your total hours may come from self-directed online study through an approved providers. So that's 20 hours. 20 hours maximum may come from self-directed online CEUs, and the remaining 10 hours must come from in-person or live online or synchronous learning. You cannot roll over any extra hours from one registration period to the next. New York accepts CEU from sponsored, approved by ASHA, AAA, IACET, the NYSSLHA, and SED. There is no cap on ASHA approved hours specifically as long as you meet the self-study versus live requirement specification. So ASHA courses can fill your entire total. Beyond traditional coursework, New York also accepts academic studies at accredited institutions, mentorship, professional study groups, publication of journal articles, and professional presentation at recognized conferences towards your CEUs. Each activity type has its own hour limit and credit ratio. So check the NYSED summary of learn activity before counting hours from non-traditional sources. I hope that today's episode have been really enjoyable for you so far. Please take the time to leave us a review, to leave us a comment, and to like today's episodes. It will really help us develop those videos and put them out faster. And if you have the time, feel free to check out the ARC Synergy app on both iOS and Android. The app is free and there's a free clinician plan, so you don't have to worry about doing any subscription to get started in the app. And let me know what you think. Now, let's get back into the episode. New graduates licensed in New York for the first time are exempt from the continuing competency requirements at their first registration renewal. You still need to renew the registration, but you do not need to show any CEU requirements. Once your second registration periods begin, you must start accruing those hours. If you were already licensed in another state before obtaining your New York license, um, if you're a new graduate, the exemption does not apply. So make sure you keep that in mind. If you reach your renewal date and have not completed all 30 hours, New York offers a one-time conditional registration. So this gives you one additional year to make up the deficiency while continuing to practice. During that conditional year, you must complete both the hours you were short from the previous cycle and the prorated hours for the conditional period. You must provide proof of compliance to the board office before the conditional year ends. The conditional registration cannot be renewed or extended, so it is a one-time option. If you do not meet the requirements by the end of the conditional year, your registration will lapse. So now let's talk about a lapse registration. If your registration has lapsed for more than 4 months, you will not be able to renew your registration online. You will have to submit a delayed registration application. The CEU requirements will also increase. You need your standard 30 hours plus one additional hour for each month you were not registered in the previous 3 years, up to a maximum of 30 additional hours. That means the maximum CEU requirements for a lapse registration is maximum 60 hours total. And at least 10 of those hours must be completed in the 12 months immediately before re-registration. And at least two-thirds, so 20 hours of the total hours must be in professional related areas. Late filing also comes with financial penalty, $10 per month that the registration has been delayed on top of the standard renewal fee. So now let's go over those standard renewal fees. The registration renewal is $229 total. So that is $179 for the registration fee plus $50 continuing education evaluation fee. Again, for a total of $229. Again, we'll talk about the late filing penalty. So that would be $10 per month of delay. And then there's an optional professional photo ID card that is $30 that will be mailed separately in approximately 6 weeks after your renewal. If you need to disclose any conviction or disciplinary actions or institutional actions, you must mail supporting court disciplinary or institutional documents to the NYSED with a brief explanation. The renewal application will ask you those questions directly. New York conducts random CEU audits every month. A sample of renewal submissions is selected, and if you are chosen, you will be notified with your renewal notice. You will then need to submit certificates, transcript, and other documentation verifying attendance, participation, and completion of your CEUs. Your registration will not be renewed until the audit documentations are verified. So you need to keep all of your CEU record organized and accessible for the full registration period. And you need to keep those documentations for at least 4 years to cover any audit scenarios. New York has exempt settings where an SLP license is not required. So, for example, public schools where you have when you already have a teacher certification credentials, government agency or an institution of higher education. If you practice exclusively in an exempt setting, you may not need to maintain your registration. However, if you wanted to practice in any of non-exempt setting, private practice, hospital, rehab, home health, you'll need to have an active registration. And if you move between exempt and non-exempt settings, you need to keep your registration current. The paper registration certificate is mailed to your address on record. It is not available online. If you also want a professional photo ID card, like I said earlier, it is $30 extra and it will be mailed separately to you. So make sure your address is current within the portal. For any renewal questions, you can contact the board. You can obtain their phone number and email address on the Arc Synergy app, where you can also upload your certificates and keep track of all of your licenses on the app. You can start with a free account and where you can look up any state information for all 50 states plus all US territories. So now to review, to close out for the renewal of SLP licenses in New York. So your license is for life, but your registration is what expires every 3 years on your birth month. You are required to complete 30 continuing education hours with self-study caps that requires at least 10 live or synchronous hours. If you're renewing for the first time since your clinical fellowship year, you do not need to complete any CEU requirements, just complete the renewal application. You have access to a conditional registration safety net if you fall short, but only once. And a lapse registration penalty will scale month by month with the cost of the re-registration process. And that is all for the renewal process for New York. Thanks for watching.